Hey, I'm Rick Fussell and welcome to the Ingrain Workshop. I recently did a hand tool build series where I built a bunch of hand tools for use here in the workshop. The only problem is I didn't have a place to store those hand tools. So in today's video, we're going to be building this wall-mounted tool chest for all my hand tools. Now this is made from plywood, some Radidia pine. I used some corrugated metal for the doors and some reclaimed post office box doors for the drawer fronts. That's coming up next here at the Ingrain Workshop. So I'm going to start with a full sheet of 3/4 inch plywood. This is birch plywood that's pre-finished on one side. And using my DIY track guide and a circular saw, I'm going to go ahead and cross-cut the plywood for the pieces that I'm going to need for the cabinet doors and the cabinet carcass. Here at the table saw, I'll start by ripping the bottom and shelf for the cabinet. I'm going to be ripping them at 9 1/8 inch strong or 9 5/32 of an inch. With my table saw fence bumped out to 10 1/8 inches, I'll go ahead and rip the two sides of the cabinet. I'll take the cabinet shelf and bottom over to the miter saw, and I'll start by just cleaning up one end. And I do this here at the miter saw, cutting down maybe 1/8 of an inch because the plywood will blow out very easily and I don't want a rough cut. So I just take my time making some shallow passes, cutting down at about 1/8 of an inch each time, and then you get a real nice clean cross cut. Once I have one end cleaned up, then I'll move it to the stop block, which I have set up at 35 15/16 of an inch, and then I'll go ahead and make the final cut, cutting the shelf to its final length of 35 15/16, and then I'll just repeat that process for the bottom of the cabinet as well. While I'm still here at the miter saw, I'll repeat the process for the two sides of the cabinet, starting off by cleaning up one end and then setting my stop block to 47 inches and then cutting them down to their final length of 47 inches. Since the tool cabinet's going to have drawers at the bottom of the cabinet, I need to take and modify my sides here at the table saw. So with my fence set at 6 inches, I'm making a rip at 6 inches, which is going to leave me 6 inches on one side and 4 inches on the other side. Now this is going to have to be a stop cut once I reach the bottom of the cabinet where the actual drawers are going to be. And I believe I stopped that cut at approximately 8 inches from the bottom of the side. And I'll go ahead and repeat this process for both sides of the cabinet. So to finish up the cut, I'm going to be using my DIY track guide and a circular saw. Now I've wrapped the plywood with some painter's tape to minimize tear out, and I've measured a line 7 5/16 up from the bottom, and I'm going to stop my cut just short of my previous cut over at the table saw. Now I'll just finish up the cut with a flush cut pull saw, and if you haven't noticed already, this actual notch or cutout is for the actual doors, so the doors are going to be 4 inches in width. And this is where the doors will go to make them flush with the cabinet carcass. So here are all the components for the tool cabinet. Now I went ahead and ripped the other components just like I did the cabinet sides, and I'll go ahead and list the components and the sizes of those components that complete the tool cabinet. That includes the doors along with the dividers for the bottom shelves. The next thing we're going to do is lay out the joinery by dry fitting everything together. So here the cabinet is just kind of dry fit together, and I'm just going to go around and mark the areas where I'm going to need to cut rabbets and dados. So here at the shelf and the bottom of the cabinet, there are going to need to be dados cut for the bottom and the shelf to fit in as far as the sides go. And then I'll need to do the same thing at the top. I'll need to cut rabbet along the sides of the cabinet so the top of the cabinet can fit in that rabbet. And then there's also going to be a 3/4 inch back panel on the entire cabinet. Now I'm going to be using a French cleat system, so that back panel will sit 3/4 of an inch from the very back of the cabinet. So there'll be a 3/4 inch space and then a 3/4 inch dado all the way down the sides to fit the back piece. So using a 3/8 inch setup block, I'm going to raise my dado stack to 3/8 of an inch. Now I've got a 3/4 inch dado stack set up here at the table saw, and then I'm just going to use a sacrificial fence on my table because plywood isn't really 3/4 of an inch. Even though I do have a 3/4 inch dado set up, it's really about 23-30 so there's going to be about a 32nd of an inch that needs to cut into my sacrificial fence to give me the correct width. But before I do anything, I always like to make a test cut into a scrap piece of plywood just to make sure the height of the blade is set correctly and the fence is set correctly. With my table saw setup dialed in, I'm going to go ahead and cut the rabbet on the bottom of the sides. Now this rabbet will accept the bottom of the cabinet. And the reason why I'm using a rabbet because this will hide and cover up the ingrain from the plywood on the bottom. Next, I'm going to use a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood to go ahead and set the distance for my fence from my dado stack. And then I'm going to run my side pieces through, cutting the dado in the back of the sides. This dado will accept the back panel of the cabinet. I also cut the same dado in the top of the cabinet. With the sacrificial fence set back up on my table saw fence and using a miter gauge, I go ahead and cut the rabbets on the top of the side panels. And this rabbet will be used to install the top of the cabinet. Now I've bumped my table saw fence out enough so I can cut the dado for the top of the drawer compartment. Next, I'm going to cut the dados into the drawer compartments. So my drawer compartment will be at the bottom of the cabinet. It's going to have 3 different compartments or drawers. These are going to be specifically designed to fit the post office box doors that I have. So if you're going to be building this, just feel free to make the drawer compartments any size that you want for the size of your drawers. These are specifically set up for these post office box doors. So I am going to be cutting 2 dados into the dividers, and this will give me 3 different separate drawer compartments. With the sacrificial fence back on my table saw, I'm going to go ahead and cut a 3/4 inch rabbet on the back of the bottom of the cabinet / drawer compartment, and this is where the back panel will adhere to. Now with the dado stack out and my regular table saw blade installed, I'm going to go ahead and take the top of the drawer compartment and cut 3/4 of an inch off the back. This will allow the back of the cabinet to slide past the top of the drawer compartment, and then it will slide in to the previous dado that we cut into the bottom of the drawer compartment. I'm going to be cutting the cabinet back out of 3/4 inch birch plywood pre-finished on one side, and I'm going to do both the rip cut and the cross cut here at the table saw, and I'm going to cut it at 35 15/16 by 46 3/16. Now I'm going to cut the back panels for the doors. Ooh, watch it. Oh yeah, a few choice words had to be deleted from the video, and the dude just keeps on going like nothing happened. So I'm going to go ahead and rip these panels at 17 9/16 inch here at the table saw. And once I get them ripped down, I'm going to take them over to my miter saw and cross cut them to 38 15/16 of an inch. And these are going to make up both the 2 door panels. So let's assemble the doors. Now, I didn't show cutting the joinery in the doors, but they were cut the same way as the joinery in the cabinet. These are going to be rabbets that are joining the top frames with the side frames. So I'm just applying some glue to the rabbet joint, and then I'm going to take and install the bottom frame to the side frame, and then just tack it in with some brad nails. And I'll just work my way around the door, joining all the joints the same way, adding a little glue, nailing in a couple of brads. I think these are 1.5 inch brads, and just work my way all the way around the door. Then once I get the door completely installed, then I'm just going to quickly double check it for square, check my diagonals, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue and set the back panel in place. And then before I tack it in with brad nails, I'm going to check it again for square, and again I check my diagonals. If I have to rack it, I think I have to rack it just a little bit here but nothing that's going to require a clamp or anything like that. And then once I've got it square, I'll go ahead and tack it in with the brad nails along the corners, double check it again for square, and then go ahead and brad nail the entire back to the door assembly, and then that completes the door assembly. With the two doors assembled, I'll start assembling the cabinet. Now the cabinet will be assembled in a similar fashion, but there will be an order of operation here. So I'm going to start by assembling the top of the cabinet to one of the sides. And again, it's the same procedure, just glue and some brad nails. With the top and one side fastened together, next thing I'll do is glue in the back. This is going to be a 3/4 inch back that's going to get glued into the dados. For now, I will come back and tack it in with some brad nails, but for right now, I'm just going to glue it in place. With the back partially installed, now I can go ahead and install the other side of the cabinet, the top of the drawer compartment, and then you can see here where I had previously cut the top of the drawer compartment 3/4 of an inch short. That way it will fit, or the back panel will fit behind the actual top of the drawer compartment. And then go ahead and install the bottom, which we did cut a rabbet in the bottom that will accept the back of the cabinet panel. And just like with the doors before, I'm going to go ahead and check the cabinet for square by taking my diagonal measurements. And if it's square, then I'm going to go around and just tack in the back panel with some brad nails to go ahead and securely fasten the cabinet together to give it that lateral support. So before I call it good, I like to measure twice and cut once. So again, my diagonal on one end is 59 9/16, and then on the other end of the cabinet, it's the same 59 9/16 inches. So I know that my cabinet's square. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and install the two drawer dividers. Then I'm going to tack them in with some brad nails from the back side of the cabinet. Now that the cabinet's assembled, I'm going to take and cut a French cleat here at the table saw. With my blade set at 45 degrees, I'm going to rip a 6-inch wide cleat that I'm going to install on the back of the cabinet. And then for nostalgia purposes, I've got an old piece of plywood from one of my late dad's projects. I'm going to cut that piece for the opposing cleat that I'm going to install on the wall of the workshop. To install the French cleat on the back of the cabinet, I'm going to use some glue and some 1¼ inch screws. Now, for applying glue on wide surfaces like this, I highly recommend using an ink roller. I'll leave a link in the video description. They're really cheap. You can pick them up at Amazon. They're really nice to have to be able to spread the glue very easily, and then they clean up as a breeze. For whatever reason, the rubber that the ink roller is made out of, the glue just will not adhere to it. So even if you don't get to clean it up and the glue dries, it really just peels off the next day. So I highly recommend it. And like I said, they're very affordable. So after I get the glue spread, then I'll take and pre-drill some holes for my screws, and I'll also countersink them at the same time. And then once I get the holes pre-drilled and countersink, I'll drive in some 1¼ GRK screws. I'll probably put about 6 to 8 in the cleat just to make sure I've got enough holding power for the tools I'm going to be having in the tool chest. Before I install the doors to the actual cabinet, I need to go around and install some edge banding all the way around the doors and the cabinets. So what I did with some Radidia pine, I ripped some pieces down to 1/8 inch strips by 3/4 inch, and then I'm going to use that as edge banding. Just apply a little glue to the edge of the plywood, and then I'll come back and shoot in some pin nails. Now these pin nails don't have a head on it like a brad nail, so they'll be very easily to conceal once I go back and stain the project toward the end of the project. So right now I'm just going to go ahead and edge band the doors, then come back and edge band the cabinet. With the edge banding being 3/4 of an inch wide and my plywood only being 23-30 seconds, I'm going to leave it proud on the outside of the cabinet. So as I'm installing the edge banding, I'm going to keep it flush on the inside of the door and cabinet, and then the excess, the 1/32 of an inch, that it's proud will be on the outside of the door or the cabinet, and then I'll come back later and trim it off with a router. So I had to switch gears here because I was waiting on the door hinges to come in. I really wanted to install the doors to the cabinets, but I had to wait. So what I decided to do was take some 1/8 inch plywood and cut some French cleats that will go inside the doors and the cabinets. And this is what I'll use to hold the tool holders within the cabinet. After I cut the cleats down to their final length over at the miter saw, which is the inside length of the doors, I went ahead and cut myself a 2-inch spacer. And I'll just use this spacer to space out the cleats all the way down the doors, and then I'll do the same thing in the cabinet carcass. So I'm just going to apply a little glue to the cleats and then set it in flush with the spacer and then tack it in with some brad nails. With the inside of the doors complete, I need to work on the outside. So on the outside, I'm going to have some rails and stiles. These are primarily decorative since the door is structurally sound with the plywood frame. So what I'm going to do here at the table saw is rip some 2-inch pieces of 3/4 inch Radidia pine, and these will make up the rails and stiles for my doors. Here at the miter saw, I'm going to go ahead and cut them down to their final lengths. Now, these rails and stiles are strictly decorative, so I'm not going to put like a tenon on the end of them like you would normally do, or they'll have a slot cut in. These are strictly decorative, and they're just going to be pin nailed to the front of the door. So I'm just going to cut them the full length as if I'm going to butt joint the stiles and rails together. So I've taken a scrap piece of rail and cut a 1/2 inch rabbet in it, leaving a 1/4 inch reveal all the way around the rail and stile. And I'm just doing a test fit here on a piece of scrap corrugated metal just to make sure the groove is big enough for the corrugated metal to fit in. And this is what's going to fasten the corrugated metal to the door itself. I'm not going to screw it or anything like that. This rabbet will just hold it in place on the door. Here at the table saw, I have my blade raised to a 1/2 inch, and then I have my fence set at a 1/2 inch. So I can start cutting the 1/2 inch rabbets on my rails and stiles. Now, for the stile cut, it's going to have to be a stop rabbet. So you'll see some blue painter's tape, and this just indicates where I need to start the cut and stop the cut. I won't need to do this on the rails since the rails will just be a butt joint fit into the stiles. But if you were to cut all the way through on the stiles, you would see the end of the rabbet. So it will need to be a stop cut on the stiles only. So to complete the rabbet cut on the stiles, I'll need to make a cut with it laying horizontal on the table. I just completed the vertical cut. Now this is the horizontal cut. But again, it needs to be a stop cut, which means I need to start and stop with the lines that I've got positioned with the painter's tape on my table saw fence. To finish the cut, I'm just going to use an oscillating tool, and I've measured up 2 inches from the bottom of the stile and then just made my cut and cut off the excess rabbet piece. And then here you can see when I hold the stile up with the rail, whereas if I didn't have the stop cut here, the rabbet would be exposed on the end of the stile. And you can see here on the rail, it's just a typical rabbet cut, no stop cut. But on the stile, it does have to be a stop cut, and then you can see the joint there. Did I mention I'm still waiting on my hinges? So I guess I'll focus my attention on rusting the corrugated metal. So here I have a brand new corrugated metal deck that I purchased at the big box store, and then I've got some muriatic acid. I just poured that in a bottle. Make sure you're wearing a respirator at all times during this process. I'll go ahead and then just spray the muriatic acid onto the corrugated metal, and you'll see instantly the steam and the heat that the acid generates as it's burning off the actual finish. You can actually see the smoke coming off, and that's just something you don't want to inhale. So just make sure that you're wearing a respirator. I'll spray this muriatic acid on, let it sit and eat for about maybe 5 minutes, and then I'll rinse it off with some clean water. So the potion I'm going to use to rust the metal consists of 1 cup of root killer, and then about 23 ounces of hydrogen peroxide, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and then a tablespoon of just household salt. Now, this is not my potion. This is the supervisor's potion, and it goes well with her broom. No, I'm just kidding. But this is the potion that we like to use, and this is what really does a good job with rusting the corrugated metal. So with the potion mixed up in a spray bottle, I'm just going to go around the metal and just be very liberal in spraying it everywhere. And you can see almost instantly it starts to rust the metal. It really works really quick, but I like to just apply a liberal amount all over it, and then just let it sit up for a day. I might even set it out in the Florida sun and let it bake in real good, and let the chemical reaction to continue to work on the metal over a 24-hour period. Finally, the hinges have came in. So I'm using an angle grinder to cut the hinge down to the correct size. I went ahead and just measured the length that I'm going to need to fit on the door, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut it here with the angle grinder, and I'm going to go ahead and cut both doors hinges. With the door hinges cut, I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill with a self-centering bit, pre-drill some holes, and then go ahead and install them with some screws. To keep the doors closed, I'm going to be using magnets, so I'm going to drill a 5/16 inch hole, maybe a 3/16 of an inch deep, and that will accept a metal ring that I'll just screw into the door. And then on the cabinet side, I'll do the same thing, except I'll install the magnet on the cabinet side. And I'll do this for both the top and the bottom of each door, so there's a total of 4 magnets, and those will be used to hold the door shut. So here's the final rusted corrugated metal after sitting in the Florida sun for about 24 hours. You can see it's got a nice rusted patina look on it. So now I'm just going to lay out the size of the panels that I'm going to need for each door. They're going to be the same size for both doors, and then just cut them out with an angle grinder. With the corrugated metal panels cut, I'm going to lay out the rails and stiles just to make sure that everything's fitting correctly. And I did cut the panels about an 1/8 inch short in either direction, just to give me a little wiggle room, just to make sure that the rails and stiles can fit in with no issues. Once I'm pretty confident that I've got a nice fit, I'll go back and glue in the rails and stiles and then shoot them in with pins just to hold them in place. Since I'm not using any hardware on the doors, I'm going to cut out a slot using a 1-inch bullnose bit on the router, and then using my router fence, I'm just going to route approximately a 4-inch groove on the bottom of the door, and that's what I'm going to use as my handle to open and shut the door. For the finish, I'm going to be using 2 types of Minwax stain, golden pecan and special walnut. You'll see here with the painter's tape, I've got taped off the rails and stiles of the doors along with the edge banding around the door compartment. That's where I'm going to be using the special walnut, and then everywhere else we'll get the golden pecan. But before I do any staining, I'm going to apply a pre-stain conditioner which keeps the stain from blotching like you'd normally see with stain. And then for a top coat, I'm going to be using some brushing lacquer. I'm going to brush the lacquer on the entire cabinet carcass and the doors, along with applying it to the corrugated metal. By applying the brushing lacquer to the corrugated metal, that will seal the rust from rusting any further and chipping off and give it a clean look. Now it's time to install the cleat on the wall, so I'm going to use a laser level here just to keep things plumb and level. And then I'm going to be using both wood screws and metal screws since I do have a metal building. I've got one wood stud that I'll be able to screw into, and then the other is a metal stud, so I'll be using some self-tapping metal screws for that. But with all 4 screws installed, this should give me plenty of support to support the weight of the cabinet and then the tools within the cabinet. So with an assist from one of the supervisor's foremans, I was able to lift the cabinet up and get it up on the cleat and get it mounted on the wall, and it was pretty much that easy. It was a little heavy, but once you got it on the cleat, you knew it wasn't going anywhere. I need to build some drawer boxes for the 2 drawers in the front drawer compartment. So I'm just going to use some 1/2-inch plywood. Because I'm using the post office box door as fronts for the drawers, I only need to cut 1 back and 2 sides. Now I've cut a 1/4-inch rabbet in the both the side panels and the back panel, and that's where the bottom panel will be affixed to. So I'm just going to apply a little glue, shoot in some 1.25-inch brad nails to the sides and the back, and then I'll just put the drawer front in place and then screw the post office box door to the actual side panels. There's a couple of bronze ears on the post office box door that will allow me to affix it to the front of the drawer. And then once I get that done, I'll just drop in the 1/4-inch panel, put in some glue, and then just shoot that in with a couple of brads as well. The center compartment's not going to be a drawer, it's just going to be a compartment because this is a 1906 Flying Eagle post office box door, and it comes with an integral frame. And so I'm just going to dry fit it in the opening and then screw. There's a couple of screw holes on each side of the frame for me to screw it to the actual compartment. And then it will just open and close via the combination. And this is just a safe space for the tools that I want to keep away from the supervisor and her foreman. So there you have it, the wall-mounted tool chest. It's got a French cleat system for mounting it to the wall so it can withstand a lot of weight. I've also got the slots cut in here at the bottom of the door, so you can easily just open up the doors and get the tools that you need either in the doors or the cabinet itself. We've also went ahead and installed the French cleat system for storing the tools, which we'll probably get around to doing in the next video. And it's a very versatile system. That way you can reorganize as you get new tools or swap out your tools. So it's just a constant work in progress as far as the tool storage goes, but you're never damaging the cabinet itself. So the cabinet always stays new, and it's a really versatile system. Now down below I have 2 sliding drawers that pull out that have the post office box drawer fronts. These doors are from 1886, so they're well over 100 years old, and I've got one on both sides. And then in the center I have a combination compartment that opens up so I can store stuff in here that I don't want the supervisor to get to. So all in all, this turned out to be a very enjoyable build, and I'm going to get a lot of use out of this tool cabinet. Like I said, next time we'll build out the tool holders inside the cabinet. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then please leave it a like. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then hit that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and ring that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all my existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support you give this channel. Now I'll leave links in the video description below to all the tools and equipment that I used on this build, and that's one way to support the channel. And if you're really feeling generous, you can always leave us a super thanks. 100% of the proceeds go to putting content in this channel. I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.